Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about the customer experience. Remember, when a customer wins, nobody loses. But is that how your business approaches the customer experience? Is that what you seriously think? There are a lot of businesses out there, and what they do is that they talk customer experience, and what they then do is they just don't deliver it. Joining me in the studio today is a man that lives and breathes customer experience. He talks to multinationals, blue chip companies around the world. Jerry Brown, he is the customer lifeguard. Jerry, it's lovely to have you back on the program. You're an old friend of the show. You've been with us before. For those people that don't really get what you're all about, or maybe haven't seen previous programs, customer experience and the customer lifeguard, what's that all about?
Well, the name came, Steve, from thinking about what it was that I was doing. And I went out as myself, which I felt quite comfortable about. But it seemed to me I needed something, some alter ego. And so the idea of saving the world from bad customer service as the customer lifeguard seemed to play quite well, and people seem to like that. And really, I look at it from both angles, both the customer's perspective, our own perspective as we would, but obviously the company's perspective. What do they need to do? And as you pointed out, many businesses simply are only paying lip service to it for one reason or the other, and we'll probably get into that a little bit today. But it just seems to me that as a customer, and that's where I form a lot of my opinions, we really are being shortchanged. And the idea of the customer winning and then nobody losing simply means that when we do the right thing for the customer, when the customer comes out of that interaction feeling, I feel pretty good about that, I feel like I've won, if that's the right terminology, then the company wins as well. There are no losers in that kind of situation. And it really just came to me to think more about it from that perspective, because I think if businesses look at it from that perspective, then I think they're going to be successful. It's
interesting, in the last couple of weeks, I've had three key pieces of customer experience. The first one was with an organisation, and I'm going to mention them because, and I'm sure they won't mind, the name of the organisation was Wessex Lifts. My father fell down the stairs a couple of weeks ago, and he has a lift in the house. We had to get it serviced. And we had an uncomfortable phone call with a representative on the phone, and I tweeted it, and I tweeted and said I wasn't that happy with it. Now, to give them credit where credit is due, they responded within 2 hours to that tweet going out. I spoke to one of the senior directors within the organisation, and we had a discussion about it, and it turned out that the actual operative who was on the phone, who I'd spoken to, was relatively new to the job. And I didn't just get great customer experience, I would rave about them as an organisation now. Wessex Lifts, absolutely fantastic. That was the first bit. The second bit was Sky, just changing from where my broadband and my Sky package. Just exceptional, and sometimes they get really bad press, Sky, don't they?
They do.
But absolutely an exceptional experience. And the third one, surprisingly, was after a bad experience was BT, where the conversation went awry. And then this morning, I've had 2 calls this morning, in fact, before this programme, who wanted to resolve things. And I felt that they were caring once again. They gave a damn. Do you think there's ever been a time when that kind of customer experience was really at its very best? Have we got better at it, or have we got worse at it?
It's an interesting question, because that's a question I ask people a lot when I do workshops and when I first started working with people, because I want to know what it is that drives them as individuals, as companies, and so on. I think the feeling is that it's not necessarily getting any better. And, we'll talk today about some of the things that I've seen very recently, not in the past, but, literally within the last few weeks. And I think the challenge that these businesses have is consistency. A company like BT, a company like Sky, perhaps less so with Wessex Lifts, a smaller business. Those bigger companies do have trouble with consistency. And so I think anyone that's had a bad experience with one of those companies typically will say, well, I called one person and this is what happened, and then I called again and I got a totally different experience. And they're challenged with that. That's a tough thing for them. And again, there are a lot of things that play into how consistent that customer experience should be. And recently, I took part in a webinar not so long ago about, and the title was, Customer Experience Doesn't Happen by Accident, It Happens by Design. And while that may seem a little more prescriptive than necessary, there's no question that you do have to design a great customer experience. Now, that doesn't mean that you should ignore the human interactions, the empathy that comes from hearing, your story about your father. Of course, you were concerned, you were worried. And in that particular situation, someone finally picked up on the fact that this was an important thing. And of course, the work that an organization like that does has to reflect how important those things are for the users. Perhaps the Sky and the BT scenario, of course the phones and broadband are important perhaps, but maybe not as much as that. And I think this is what's happening. So it is still inconsistent. There are still a lot of things going on. But as I'll talk about a little bit more in the program, I think what we are seeing a shift, and there's some reasons for that.
Do you think it makes any difference whether you provide good or bad customer service? Is it something that can be identified and seen on the bottom line for a business?
Absolutely.
It's funny, while you were talking, it reminded me of our last conversation where we talked about Ryanair. And,
That's right.
and Ryanair there for years were filling their aircraft, providing dreadful service at times, or at least you felt you were being told off all the time. I think the last time you were on the programme, they were going through the problem with their pilots, where they didn't have enough pilots, and they'd cancelled all of these. Doesn't seem to have affected them. In fact, I saw an advert on the TV last night where they're now doing Ryan hotels. So they are going from strength to strength on the back of dreadful customer service.
Interestingly enough, right after that, and I think we may have mentioned on the program, but Michael O'Leary, the CEO of Ryanair, said about all of the complaints he was getting and all of the people that were tweeting and doing all of these things on social, he said, you know what? He said, all of those people that are on social media, they'll be booking with me next week. And I guess that's part of it. If we don't take action ourselves, and of course, in many cases, there may not be an alternative. But to give you an example of whether it pays to the bottom line, last year, I go back to Canada fairly regularly, and last year, we went back in August of last year. And historically, I've traveled on Air Canada, which is very much, it's a flag carrier like BT and many of the others. And they're not really bad. I wouldn't, we've had good and bad experiences, but we decided we sort of had enough of what I would call their complacency. So we booked with an airline called WestJet. WestJet is a very well-known airline in Canada. They've been around for over 25 years, highly regarded. And 2 years ago, they started flying from Gatwick to places in Canada. We thought, well, we'll give them a try. So we booked a flight with them, and it was a great experience. The flight to Toronto was great. The people in the cabin were really humorous. If you've ever been on these places, these airlines where they do the safety announcement and they're funny when they do it, and it's great. It just kind of puts you at ease. Anyway, on the trip from Toronto to Vancouver, I had to go on a line and book seats and pay for luggage. You do have to pay for a few extras, which is fair enough. I had a few problems booking, so I ended up calling the contact center. And someone came on and said, I'm really sorry, we've had problems. He said, let me put you through to one of our technical team. I'm sure they'll be able to help you. And what I was expecting is I'd be on hold for 5 minutes. I'd get through to somebody else who'd ask me all the same questions. Who are you? Why are you calling? I got through in about a minute. The person knew who I was, knew what my issue was. Mr. Brown, I'm really sorry you've had this issue. Let me take care of this for you. What seats would you like? And so I told her, she said, because you've had to call us. The ones
inside,
exactly, the front, one right at the front. Wasn't able to get that far, but what happened was, she said, I'll take care of this for you. And she said, because you've had to call us, she said, there would be no charge for that. And she said, will you be checking any luggage? I said, yeah, we'll probably have a bag. She said, okay, well, I'll take care of that for you as well. There'll be no charge for that. Now, that was $100. So here's a person who was empowered to make that kind of decision, made it without question. Now, can they do that for every customer? Of course not. But she had the information available to her, probably that this was our first trip on Ward Air, and clearly wanted to make an example. Now, if we decide to travel with them fairly frequently, which we probably will be over the next 10 years, and we take 10 trips with them rather than Air Canada, that's probably $25,000 or $30,000 that they will get that they wouldn't have got. I'm telling the story probably for the 25th time, so they're getting good press right. So yes, it absolutely pays off. And I guess the alternative or the opposite is bad service. And you think about Ryanair, you think about United Airlines. If you remember the United Airlines story of 9 years ago, my good friend Dave Carroll, United breaks guitars and all of that.
Yeah.
Well, United Airlines didn't learn, because last year when they bundled the Fashioner off the plane with people now taking pictures, live pictures of it, that hasn't helped them, and the BA meltdown as well. So
where does it start, do you think? So where within an organisation is the focal point for customer service? Right. Because we sometimes criticise the first line of contact,
yes,
the operatives that we talk to, the call centre staff, the call handlers, that they're the ones that get the criticism. But is the fault with them, or is it with senior management?
Well, it absolutely is with senior management. There's no question about that. That's where it starts.
It's a culture.
It is a culture, and again, that's one of the things I talk a lot about, the 4 C's of customer experience: culture, communication, commitment, and community. And the culture, if the culture isn't there, and you can't mandate culture, this is something I've said a long time, but you know what the culture is like. The culture at a WestJet in Canada, I've actually done some work with them many years ago when I was still in Canada. Fabulous people to work with, and that does come from the top. And it comes from the top, and the experience I had was a great example of it. We had an empowered employee who could make a decision, and as I said, you can't have them giving away $100 to everyone, but they were able to make an assessment, understand the situation, and had the freedom and the ability to do something about it. Most of the time, and another thing I say a lot, people in contact centers are decent, hardworking people. I'm in contact centers probably on a weekly basis, sitting with them, doing side-by-sides, hearing what they go through. And they go through a tough thing. I've got immense respect for what they have to suffer, and not just from customers, what they have to suffer from their own organization with dumb rules, with policies they can't possibly do, with technology that doesn't work. So if the senior team does not recognize how to make that work for their employees, then it will never change.
Listen, more from Jerry Brown to come in just a moment. He is the customer lifeguard. We're going to be talking a little bit more. We're going to be talking a lot more about customer experience still to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. Hope you're enjoying today's show. We are live. Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, if you've got a comment, perhaps maybe you've had some dreadful customer or a dreadful customer experience in the past, or even good customer experience, because that happens on rare occasions. As I said, the experience I had with Sky this week was absolutely phenomenal. It's interesting as well because of the culture we're in now, where we're moving, shall we say, our utilities around a lot more than we used to. It's interesting the way the utility company that you're with, who get a prod and they get a last chance and they still do nothing with it. That's quite interesting. British Gas, hello. Hi there. You've told me when I'm leaving you. Well, I know that. I've arranged to, but you could have done more. And companies can do more. Okay, let's move on to another subject. Let's go back to what we were talking about last week. We had Linda Bazant. She, of course, is a barrister and a GDPR speaker trainer, and also GDPR audit consultant. We were talking about GDPR last week, and the question we asked is, did you know where your personal data is? As always, GDPR is one of those hot topics that keeps raising its ugly head. It's the middle of May is when we're going to be actually instigating this law this regulation comes into force. Are you going to be ready for it? It's interesting. A lot of SMEs, a lot of small businesses, either A, don't know about it, or B, don't think it's going to apply to them. There are some people out there that think because we're leaving the EU, that the law will actually cease to exist anyway. And of course, all this is wrong. We've had the data protection regulations, the Data Protection Act. That's been in for a number of years, and if you are doing stuff with that at the moment, well then surely GDPR is just an extension of that to make it more secure and make it better, to keeping up, in fact, with the technology. But are you doing that? It's a great show with Linda. She gives some really good advice. If you missed the show last week, please do watch the entire program. She's done 3 or 4 programs now on GDPR, and they will give you a foundation into what you should be contemplating and what you should be doing, an action plan around the general data protection regulations. Just to give you a few hints and tips very quickly, here's some of the key things that came out last week's edition of Business Connections Live. On today's show, we're going to be talking about GDPR. I know you're beginning to yawn, your eyes are glazing over, and you're thinking to yourself, really? Again? Well, do you know, this is the question today, do you know where your personal data is? Yep, we're talking GDPR, we're talking about personal data. Joining me in the studio today is Linda Bazant. She's a barrister, GDPR trainer, speaker and audit consultant.
So the General Data Protection Regulation will replace the Data Protection Act, which came into force in 1998. And the reason for that is because we do so much on the internet now, social media, everything is digital. It's being brought into the 21st century effectively. So hand in glove with GDPR will go cybersecurity, because it's really important that you've got all of your security right so that your data doesn't get hacked. It's all about trust. People are now saying we don't want to give our data over to these people because we don't trust them. And it's not just a case of trusting in as much as they get spam emails. It's a case of trust with regard to the fact that people are losing data. Data is being breached and an awful lot of fraud is going on at the moment. So if you make absolutely certain that you are explicit with all of your customers that this is the data that you're going to be collecting, and remember, in some corporate video that we do, the client will use their employees in some of the video. And so we've actually got to make absolutely certain that consent is given there. There is a lot of scaremongering out there. However, it's really important that you do become compliant. But we talked earlier about the Data Protection Act and the fact that GDPR will effectively replace that. But because the Data Protection Act is already in existence, most of what you do and have been doing for 20 odd years now, 30 odd years, has got to be data protection compliant. So you've already got the groundwork there. The whole point of GDPR is to tighten that up for everybody. The first thing that I ask for is I say, where is all of your data? Do you keep your data on spreadsheets, on databases? Do you keep it on bits of paper? GDPR is coming. We have all got to be compliant, and as a business I need to know that you're GDPR compliant. I want to know what you're doing about it, and I want us to have a clause in the contract between us that confirms that everything that we send to you as a data controller, we are giving you instructions what to do with it, but you are only doing with it what we are instructing you to do with it, and you're not doing anything else with it. You're not sending it anywhere else where it's not meant to go, and that we have got something in place that says that you are dealing with it as a contractual clause. I think really if you're going to get somebody to come in and talk to you about auditing your business, you need to talk to them first. Fire some questions at them by email. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever why they shouldn't be able to answer them initially. They shouldn't be charging you for that, because you're actually finding out whether they know what they're talking about to be able to come in and help your business. GDPR will continue to remain law after we leave the EU. This is now becoming British law. And as an individual, you are entitled to have all of the information that any organisation holds on you. And as I said earlier, not just online, but also as bits of paper. The way that it will change is at the moment, when you ask for your data, you pay a fee of £10, and the person that you apply to has 40 days to respond to you. On the 25th of March, this will change. It will be free to access your data.
They're going to love this, aren't they?
And the companies only have 30 days to respond to you. I'm Linda Bazant. I'm a barrister and GDPR consultant and trainer. My website is linda@lindabazant.com. I've been talking to you today about GDPR. And one of the things that are key here is that an awful lot of businesses are burying their head in the sand and pretending it isn't happening. It is happening. It's got nothing to do with Brexit. After the 25th of May 2018, when it becomes law, it will continue to be law even after March 2019, when we leave the EU. You need to look at where your data is coming from, what you are doing with it, and who you are sharing it with. You need to make absolutely certain that your privacy notices on your website are right up to date to give the information about exactly what you're doing with the information that you collect on your websites. You need to make sure that your employees understand exactly what the implications of GDPR are, and that you have all of the appropriate training in place, that you have consent for marketing, unambiguous and explicit consent for marketing, and you also need to remember that there are some cases in which your legitimate business interest allows you to use personal data. It is a big minefield, but you do need to understand that you've already got the Data Protection Act, and you should be data protection compliant anyway. GDPR requires you to just do a lot of tweaking, and if you need help, ask someone to come and help you. You've probably done an awful lot of the work yourself already. You just need someone to get you over the finish line.
Linda Bazan there talking all about GDPR. If you want to find out more about GDPR, what your business should be doing, I do suggest that you go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com and have a look at the entire program. In fact, there are 250 programs sitting on that very website there that are going to help your business to succeed. And that's what this channel is all about. It's a great way of getting great business information on an ongoing business. By the way, if you want to have a program just like this one, very quickly, a quick trailer for this. If you do like a show like this one for your own organisation, why don't you drop us an email? It's dead easy to do. Just drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. That'll come through to either myself, Steve Highland, or through to Linda Bazan. If you want to talk to Linda about GDPR, you can also contact her on that. You can also go to her own website as well. You can also give us a ring on 01784 256 777. That's our telephone number straight through to the studio. Obviously, you'll go through our switchboard initially. If you want to follow our stream of consciousness, then BCL Business TV is the way to do that. You can comment, you can retweet, you can like on Twitter as well. You can see us on Facebook. Here's the Facebook information. And if you want to watch the entire show, please go to the main website. That's where we like you to go. Of course, the programs are available, obviously, on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Stitcher, Blueberry, blah, 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 blah. They are available everywhere. In fact, we're broadcasting this program live right now on Periscope and also on Ustream as well. So there's a whole host of different ways that you can actually watch the program. But if you want to get in touch with us, do. We quite like talking to people. No, we do like talking to people, not even quite like. We do like talking to people. And if there's something that we can help you with, then please don't hesitate. Get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live. Hello there, welcome along. You're watching Business Connections Live. In the studio today is Jerry Brown. He is the customer lifeguard, and we're talking about all things when it comes to customer experience. If your company is not got a focus on that, then is it going to be costing you money? Jerry, you've got a book coming out very shortly in the next couple of months.
I do.
What was the thoughts behind it? What instigated the book to come out? Because it's all very well walking around going, you know, you've got to get your customer experience right. Why a book?
Well, I think it was really all of the things that I've been writing and speaking for quite some time, so I had quite a lot of content. And I think most of us that do this kind of thing, and as you and I both know as members of the Professional Speaking Association, everyone says you've got to have a book. So I thought, well, all right, I better have a book.
So you thought you better get a book?
Better get a book, you know. So I took all of the things I've been talking about and writing about over the last 4 or 5 years, and I thought, let me see if I can put them into some kind of logical order to do that. And as I was doing that, I was realizing, and I thought about various titles of the book. And it got to the point where I thought, you know what, there's so much. You asked about, you know, was it getting better or not? And I thought, you know what, it doesn't appear to be. And one of the things that did that, I'm a great collector of, as you can see here, I've got lots of clippings. And the reason I do this is I like the written word. I like the way these things just jump out at you. And I had a bunch of clippings that I decided to put together for a keynote and a webinar I was doing, which really to me reflected how many businesses are treating customers. And perhaps we'll just look at a few of those now just to see. And you'll notice here, so you'll see the one at the top, consumers deceived. I want you to think about some of these words. Consumers deceived by claims on broadband speed. Travel firms dupe buyers with bogus deals. We've got one where Epsom tricks customers. And then we start talking about 7 million train journeys. Don't get me started on the train companies because I'm in Southern Rail. And then another one talking about executive pay. And it became, it just looked to me as if this is becoming more and more important for people. And I realize that newspapers sensationalize certain things, but these aren't red tops. This is the Times. Mm-hmm. This is a quality newspaper.
A real paper.
A real paper. And I looked at that, and then In combination with that, a lady called Jill Inslee, who writes a column for the Sunday Times about, she's a consumer champion. So she was writing about all of the things that she talked about, and she had this this notation which basically said, 500,000 reasons to write to Jill Inslee. She was talking about the fact that she had secured £500,000 in compensation for many of her readers.
Just looking at the quote, they have usually fallen victim to poor customer service, shoddy products, out-of-date computer systems, under-trained staff, badly written documentation, poorly explained processes. That sounds like 1 million companies.
Well, exactly. and these are all things that are fixable. Or they're things that people look at and go, we won't bother. Because you're right, this happens in a lot of businesses. And the experiences that you had, it could be the experience you had is because of computer systems. I see this a lot because a lot of the work I do is also on the technology side. And I see these organizations that have BT actually is an example, if we want to call them out. I've had many different experiences with BT where the information they have on me, if I call into one contact center, it's got one thing, it's got one address. Then I call back and they go, oh yes, Mr. Brown, you're at such and such an address? No, I'm not. I left there 5 years ago. And so things like this, these are the kinds of things that I believe organizations can address. Yes, there's a little investment needed, there's a little bit of money, but these are the things that are fixable. And so when I look at this, I looked at this and I thought, this isn't accidental. Companies just, whether you want to go as far as to say they don't care, I think many don't, but they don't bother to fix these things. And if you let these things fester like anything else, it just gets worse. And so the people in the organization, you ask about the people, they look at that and they go, well, they can't be bothered to fix this. Why should I bother? So.
But it does lead us back to the other aspect of all of this. That does it matter? It's that Ryanair experience again, isn't it? Well, if they don't fix it, will it make a jot of difference?
Well, it won't unless we as customers, as you know, we spoke about this last time, you've seen me do my let's get ready to grumble shtick, which is really about customers have got to take some responsibility as well. You did. You made the call. You tweeted or whatever you do. I'm an inveterate caller, emailer, tweeter, when something happens, and I've had tremendous results from it because what happens, it does focus those organizations on it. It's a shame that we have to do that, but that's really what's happening. And
is some of it, though, the fault of the customer? Because you can very, very much be in that frame of mind where when you're phoning up, you're ready for a fight, aren't you? You're nearly preconditioned to think this is going to be a difficult experience.
Well, that's the whole idea behind when a customer wins, nobody loses. Because what I'm saying is, if you go in, and you're right, many people go in with that in mind. You're expecting bad things to happen, and more of that. I started thinking about that a bit more, and I thought it really reflects what's going on in the world. And there's a study done by a company called Edelman, which they bring out every year. It's the Trust Index that they publish on a yearly basis. They actually brought this out at the same time as the Davos conference. And of course, a lot of people point to Davos as being a celebration of all that's wrong in the world in many ways, from if you're depending on where you sit on the political spectrum. And they publish this survey that talks about the trust that people have in their country, in their institutions, in their companies, and 20 out of 28 countries distrusted everything that was in their country, including the UK and US. Very low scores. 42% of the people said they didn't trust any of the businesses. And this is what's at the heart of it. So in many ways, what you say about, will it make a difference? Well, it probably won't for a while until people begin to recognize that customers or companies are serious about making the change.
Obviously, it's the landscape that we find ourselves in. Is social media to blame for this? Is it mass communications? Is it the media organisations? Is it a company like ours? Are we peddling the wrong kind of truth, or are we not presenting the truth in the right way? I mean, it's a bit of an issue when you've got the president of the US who uses on a regular basis the word fake news within any correspondence that he does, because you get to a stage where you don't know what to believe.
I think it's a great point, but I think as customers, we know this isn't fake news. We know how bad things are sometimes for us. And again, a lot of these clippings that I keep and a lot of the references I make are that. Interesting one on the weekend from Ian Day, who writes another column in the Sunday Times. He said, He was talking about BT, and he was talking about the fact that BT shares have dropped. Interesting enough, you talk about utilities. BT shares have dropped by a half. Centrica, British Gas's parent company, shares have dropped by a half in the last year or so. And so from a shareholder perspective, even if you put the customer aside, from a shareholder perspective, they're starting to make some noise about, well, why is this happening? A lot of it is down to the service. So what Ian was talking about, he said, he was talking about the fact that they've been on a roller coaster ride, and and was talking about the fact, of course, that BT have made heavy investments in BT Sport into buying the Premier League rights. And he said, there's still some truth to the argument, although less than before. Like many, I am a BT customer mostly by force. High-speed internet required to support my family's Netflix habit. Anyone who can offer me higher speeds, better reliability, and glitchless multi-device streaming will get my business. Am I alone? So this is in yesterday's paper. And the article itself was about something completely different. And so what you're seeing is more and more of this. So the reason I mentioned the Edelman survey is I think that what we're seeing, the rise of populism, and certainly social media is doing its part, rightly or wrongly. And again, thinking about the United Breaks Guitars episode with Dave Carroll, that was 9 years ago. That was really before YouTube really had taken off. But he's had 17 million views of that. So,
and now does public speaking on it.
Yeah, exactly. He's made a tremendous career. He's actually very kindly written a nice review for my book, so I appreciate that. But what it is that I think people are beginning to rise up. This is a new revolution, if you like, and I'm all in favor of it, because unless people do start to make a difference, unless people start to say to Michael O'Leary, you know what, we're not going to fly with you again. Now, of course, the alternatives aren't that great. That's the problem.
You could fly Budget Airways, British Airways,
exactly.
because it just seems at the moment that there are two sides to this scale, this balance. We've got the organisations, the Centricas, the BTs, and of course what they're always trying to do is they're trying to drive down their operating costs all the time, so that there's more money for the shareholders. And as they drive down their operating costs, then what you're seeing actually over here is you're seeing an issue when it comes to the customer service that's being experienced, which is ultimately what the product is.
Yes, well, that is, you're right. In the utility market, that is it. You don't really care, what your electricity looks like, or the color of it, or what your gas smells like, as long as you can smell it. It really is one of those things that you don't care about. That's all they have to offer at this point. So yes, it's absolutely vital. And most people that start cutting costs, again, you mentioned people doing that. Ian Khan, the president of or the CEO of Centrica, we're probably going to have some job cuts. I've never seen a company yet that's cut jobs and improved customer service. Even if those things aren't necessarily customer service jobs, those things just don't work.
But this is the issue, isn't it, with companies being run by accountants? There are two ways to increase the turnover of a business, or the bottom line. One is to cut jobs and to save the money on those people that you're employing, or to provide a better service so you get more customers and get more revenue that way. Exactly. And there just seems to be the easier way initially is to cut jobs, to cut the service, make the business smaller, because you can see a better return momentarily on the amount of investment that you're putting in. I mean, it's a real issue. I mean, and is this fixable, or are we going to be here in a year's time, do you think, saying exactly the same thing again? Is it something that we are brought up with? You're Canadian. The Americans you do feel give better customer service, whether it's better lip service customer service, I don't know. Is there not a way? I mean, where will we go with this, do you think?
Well, we will be here in a year having the same
And it'll
discussion.
be the same conversation.
Whether there will be more companies that are taking notice of what's being said, that's a question. And that's really what I'm seeking to do. I recognize, you said, there are millions of companies not getting it, and there are millions of companies that won't get it. But I do believe there are companies I'm working with, and I'm not saying I'm totally responsible for it, but I am seeing them recognize the value, and the value is in increased sales, the value is in reduced cost, because every time you make a complaint, I'm sure we all have, we've had problems with whether it's mobile phone companies, insurance companies, and so on. When you make a formal complaint, either through the Ombudsman or through the FCA or one of the Ofgem, Ofwat, any of these, that costs the business a lot of money. It will vary, but let's say it's £500 to £1,000 for them to address a formal complaint. And the more people that do that, the more it's going to cost those businesses to do that. So things like this will start to affect the bottom line. And when the board meets and says, well, wait a minute, we've seen a tremendous increase in complaints, and those complaints are now costing us X, what are we doing about it? And only when those questions are asked by people like that are things going to happen. But, you know, we've seen with Carillion recently, now that's not a customer service story as such, but it is one in which we've seen clearly the board or somebody was asleep at the wheel. And so what we've seen is the company go into receivership or an administration simply because, well, I say simply, because it doesn't appear like that those things were being taken account of. And I think the same thing will happen here. Businesses will fail. There's no question about it. Organizations will start to fail in significant numbers because the comparisons, and whatever you think about Amazon or whatever, you know, their tax policies, Amazon run a tremendously efficient, effective business. And I always ask people, when was the last time you had to call Amazon about a customer service issue?
Exactly. And I mean,
very rarely.
You sit on your laptop and you order, and the chances are it'll be there the same day.
Exactly.
Listen, more from Jerry Brown in just a moment. Jerry Brown, the Customer Life Guide, here on this edition of Business Connections Live. We're going to be talking about, you've kind of talked there about changes and attitudes. What we need to talk about in just a moment, the characteristics of companies that are making a positive difference. Can you identify those companies, and how easy is it for a company to take on that persona, to make those changes, and whether they'll be significant or not, and also the 4 simple but valuable non-negotiable principles that will lead to successful companies deploying customer experience, a proper customer experience. Still to come with Jerry Brown on this edition of Business Connections Live. Now, I'm hoping that I'm going the right way with this. I've got a piece of paper in front of me. It is David Williams in just a moment, isn't it? It's lovely. Thinking about the customer perspective, which we feel fits in rather nicely with this. We had David Williams on the programme a little while back. He was on Business Connections Live 2008 on the 11th of December. David joined us. He's the founder and leader of a company called Shuttle. Great show, actually. We were looking at all aspects of business, but this was the thing that was truly the corner pin, the thing that's the most important. Why you should be thinking about the customer perspective. He asked some very interesting questions. Do you know your customer? Do you know your customers? And when I say that, you know, their profile, who are they? Why do they buy from you? Those are the basic questions. And what's it like to buy from you? What is the experience actually like when somebody goes onto your website, when somebody tries to contact you? What is the experience your customer goes through when they're actually buying from you? What is that like? It was a great show, some really good points. We always have key takeaways at the end of every show. And here's what David Williams said when he was on Business Connections Live.
David Williams, and I'm the founder and leader of Shuttle. We are an online onboarding system, which Steve's very kindly pointed out the website for is shuttleon.com. No more pitching. Understanding your customer persona is absolutely key to the success of your business. Do you understand who's going to buy your service or why they're going to buy it? Do you actually listen to them? Do you action what they tell you? You should, you really should. If you want to optimize your product development, your marketing spend, the direction and motivation of your staff and your teams and the people that support you, your outside supporters as well, everybody needs to understand what the journeys are and why we're all doing what we're doing, especially the customers. Why will they choose you? Why are you the expert in the field that you're serving? Why you? Why not you, right? But why you? They'll pick you if you've taken the time to understand who they are, if you've taken the time to understand what their problems are, what their pain is, and what the solution that you're producing is, and how that's relevant and how that fits and works for them, and how they can see a future. Now, it may just sound like we're talking about a technology path like we're on, but actually, if you look at, we talked earlier about the petrol forecourt with the bags of charcoal out the front. If you live in an area that's only got flats, why would you sell charcoal? Would you be better off selling window boxes? Understand your customers. It's relevant in no matter what business you're in. Use the support around you. Listen to people that are in business. We talked earlier about Penny's lovely cafes, and I think they're a great idea because you'll meet people in the space, people that understand business, people that understand your pressures as well, and they'll give you ideas and ask them why they're doing it. Use the resource around you, it's always there to be had. But I'll come back again and I'll always say, no matter who you're working with, understand the personas of the people you're selling to and the people you're buying from. Why, and I'll probably leave it there. Thanks, Steve.
David Williamson, a good show as well. He's from Shuttle. He's the founder and leader of Shuttle, thinking about the customer perspective. It's Business Connections Live 208, and it was broadcast on the 11th of December. Don't forget, all those programmes are actually sitting there as well. If you do want to watch any of those shows, you can go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. There's over 250 hours of great business content. There it is. Just go there. Should really do it that way, shouldn't I? So go there, and you'll be able to watch all those different programs. As I said, we cover all different topics, everything from crowdfunding, general data protection regulations, to sales, marketing techniques, and also customer experience, employee comms, everything. There's a program about absolutely everything there, so do make your way to the website. It's great to have your company. We're live today. With me in the studio is Jerry Brown. He is the customer lifeguard. We're talking about that customer experience, and interesting what David was saying there. It kind of leads nicely. We'll skip around a little bit, but it leads nicely into the four simple but valuable, as it says here, non-negotiable principles and successful companies are deploying, and see how any business can adapt these for their own business. So just take us through what those key principles are. Sure. So I'm a company. I think I need to make certain that my customer experience is effective. I need my customers to feel warm, cuddled and loved.
Sure.
So what are the principles I need to remember?
So the four principles are culture, communication, commitment, and community. And I developed those because I looked at what other really successful businesses were doing, and ones that not just brand new businesses, but businesses that have been around for a while. And I looked at people like Zappos, which is a very big retailer in the U.S., online retailer. I looked at people like Four Seasons Hotels. I looked at, of course, Waitrose and John Lewis here, which, they've been doing the same thing, if you like, or adhering to the same principles for about 60 or 70 years, or if not longer.
So is it cross-industry specific?
Yes, absolutely.
So it'll work anywhere,
yes,
will it?
Absolutely. Yes, you clearly, you're going to see some differences in a B2B or a B2C environment in certain respects. But the fundamental issue is it's human beings dealing with human beings. So if we start with culture, when I talk about culture, we think about the organizations that are doing bad things to people. And you think, when I say bad things, well, let's think about the ones we've mentioned. Let's think about the railways. Let's think about Southern Rail. Do you think the people there go to work with a smile on their face every day, feeling, wow, isn't this a great place to be? A lot of it isn't their fault, although, many would blame the unions and things like that. Do you think they really have a great time? Think about some of the things that have happened. We mentioned the BA meltdown last summer. And are those people really enthused about it? I've read lots of things after that from BA former and present employees really saying it just simply, the culture there is toxic. And we hear this used a lot. So starting with the culture, anyone in the business from the top to the bottom will know what their culture is. They'll know if they've got the kind of culture that is going to support the kinds of changes they need to make. And one of the companies I talk about in the book, and I've had quite a lot of involvement with, is a company called HomeServe. And I've mentioned them in the past. HomeServe were fined £31 million in 2014 for mis-selling, very much like PPI. And as an organization, that culture, that culture of sell, 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 was ingrained in it. They turned that around in very short order with some very strong management to totally change the way they do business. They're now one of the most highly regarded companies by any measure, by profitability, by the way that their employees rate them, by the way that their customers rate them, and the way that they do business. So they've totally changed that. So that was really a cultural shift. There were other elements of it, yes, but it was mostly culture. When we look at communication...
Well, before you move on to communication,
sure.
let's look at culture. Where is the culture set within an organisation? Is a culture set top down or is it bottom up? I honestly believe that there is nobody that wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go in and I'm going to hack off a few of our customers. Nobody wakes up with that intention. In fact, I believe that nobody truly wakes up with the intention to annoy anybody throughout the day. But is it a style of management that we see? Is there a style of management across all these companies that don't have great customer service, or is it a disconnect? We had a program where we talked about employee engagement and we called it cloud busting. So you had your senior management team who thought everything was great. You had this layer of cloud between them, and then you had your workforce. And what was happening with the workforce were all talking to each other, and the management team were all talking to each other, but nobody was talking through the cloud. Yeah. And in fact, the guy that was on the show when we were talking about it, the project that was installed was called cloud busting, so that messages started going up and down. So is it the lack of communication, or is it a cultural type of management style that is the cause?
I think you could probably look at a lot of things for it. I think certainly you mentioned earlier that many businesses are still run by accountants. And I have nothing against accountants, but if that's their background and that's their philosophy, often stated by the term shareholder value. I'm here to improve shareholder value. That's what I do. And so that's the culture they create, and that culture seeps down. And you're probably right, where there is multi-layers of management, quite often that message does get lost. I think if you look at some of the companies that have done particularly well, you look at the Virgin brand, clearly Richard Branson, the things that he's done, he's very, very...
But he gets it wrong, but then he gets away with it.
He doesn't get it wrong. The people that work for him get it wrong.
Yeah.
So he, if you read one of his books, Screw It, Let's Do It, unfortunately, many of his Virgin brand companies don't operate that way. He's all for that. He's great, wonderful, but unfortunately it does not filter down. And it doesn't filter down perhaps because now, when he started Virgin Records, perhaps you could do that. That was great in 1972. It's changed a lot since then.
But so, does that not show the problem then that business owners have? If you are running a multinational, we talked about Centrica earlier on, so if somebody like Centrica or BT, which has got its own internal problems when it comes to the way it's dividing itself, or even to an organisation like Sky, which is a huge multinational as well, is it then difficult for that communication? Is that where it's lost, is it?
Well, I think it depends on how you do that. Again, I come back to a company like HomeServe. HomeServe has a regular, by regular I mean weekly session with their CEO, who is typically quite often in the contact center, meeting with people, having often a one-on-one communication with people. They get to ask him questions, he gets to ask them questions. There is, if you like, a physical connection as well in terms of the communication. When you start doing those kind of things, when we hear the terms walk the walk, talk the talk, it's getting down to that level, because if you are insulated, even if with the best will in the world, and you go, yes, we're going to do better, we're going to do all these wonderful things. If you are insulated from the front line, and when I go into organizations, I start with the front line, because they know where the bodies are buried and they probably have a detailed map. And they know more about it than anything. And so you'll get the words from them, they'll tell you what's going on, but unless that is communicated upwards and somebody actually does something about it, then that frontline team just gets frustrated again, and they get annoyed and they go, well, it's no point saying anything, nothing ever changes.
Look at me extrapolating things. So that's culture.
Yes.
Next one is? Communication.
And communication, again, come back to the situations we've had. So one of the things I say is that the biggest challenge to communication is the fear of litigation. If you look at the airlines again, when BA had their meltdown last summer, when the train companies have an issue, what's the thing you see when they interview people most on TV, when they're interviewing the passengers? What is it that you hear mostly from them? You mostly hear, they didn't tell us what was going on. Nobody told us. Nobody heard. Most people understand if things happen. What they don't understand is why you can't tell them what the next step's going to be. You hear of these people stuck on planes for 4 hours and 5 hours. So communication, whether it be to your customers, whether it be to and from your employees, it's a two-way street. If the employees are encouraged to speak without fear of being fired or fear of anything else, then you'll start things happening. And so communication is so critical. And everyone nods, oh yes, of course we can. And they don't. They absolutely don't. So keeping that communication flow out to customers if you have a bad situation. In your case, where you had a good result from your lift experience, that was communication. That was somebody going, right, we need, they could have fobbed it off because, oh yes, we know, but someone took the time to literally communicate. So,
yes.
So that's what I talk about. It's that level.
They took ownership, didn't they?
They took ownership. That's another, very important word in the communication issue. If you talk to someone in a contact center, because quite often that's where we start, as you did, if that person truly does take ownership, and even if they have to go somewhere else, because quite often, well, I'm sorry, I can't handle this for you, I'll have to send you somewhere else. Most organizations that are serious about this, they have people that take ownership. So the first person you speak to, they go, right, I'll sort this out. Mr. Highland, I'm going to make sure that this works. I will be the one getting back to you. I'll be the one and they do. They may have to go somewhere else. They may have to talk to somebody else. They take ownership. They take responsibility. They come back in the time frame that they've suggested. Mr. Highland, I'll be back to you by the end of the day with a resolution.
If they're allowed to.
If they're allowed to,
and
yes. Exactly.
And so that's culture, communication. What's the...
Well, that's part of commitment. So we asked about, whether the top down. Quite often you hear them say, well, I'm involved in all of this. I'm very involved in it. And you think, well, are you? And the way I describe the difference between involvement and commitment is that if you think of a bacon and egg sandwich, in a bacon and egg sandwich, the chicken is involved, the pig is committed. That's the difference between those two situations. And so people quite often aren't committed.
I love that. If that's just gone like that over, I've never heard that before.
Well, that's the best way of describing it.
The chicken's involved, but the pig is committed. Is it in an egg and bacon sandwich?
And so if the senior leadership is really, and I mean committed, okay, what are we doing? How are we improving this? We had these complaints last week. What are we doing about it? Now, I'm not saying that the CEO or MD has to drill down to every little piece of minutia, but they have to understand what's involved. Commitment from the bottom up as well. It's not just the top. So the people at the bottom have to be committed as well. This is a plan. We're going to make this work. We're going to turn this around. And so they have to believe, because it won't happen immediately either. Once you recognize you've got an issue and the senior people say, right, this is what we're going to do, the people on the front line also have to be committed to making that work, whatever that means.
And the last one is?
Community.
Well, don't go down community.
Okay.
Hold that thought for just
Sure.
one moment. So we're going to be talking about community. So you're getting the 4 key fundamental principles that you need to be applying within your business. And I hope you found today's programme really interesting. You are watching Business Connections Live, and my guest in the studio today is Jerry Brown. He is the Customer Lifeguard. Listen, just like to say thank you very much to all the people who download the program on a regular basis on iTunes. Huge audience on iTunes. And if you are one of those that is downloading the program and you're finding it useful and enjoyable, please do us a favour, leave a favourable review. It's dead easy to do. All you got to do is go into your iTunes account. You'll see a little tab. If you are already listening to us, just view the program in iTunes. It takes you to this page here, and you'll see there's a tab that says ratings and reviews. Click on that and it'll take you to a place where you can leave your comments. Write the review, give us 5 stars if you can. Say how great Jerry was, of course, because he is. He's great, just tell us. And what will happen due to the algorithm that happens within iTunes, if somebody else is watching another business program on iTunes, what will then happen is that the site, iTunes, will recommend on and say, listen, you've watched this one, why not watch Business Connections Live as well? And that'll be a huge help for us. It makes the program bigger, brighter and better. So we really do appreciate that, so please do it. You're watching Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Jerry Brown, the Customer Lifeguard. We've been going through the 4 core principles. We did culture, we did communications, we did commitment, and the last one is?
Community. And the reason in just reflecting back on the 4 principles, I used this intentionally, simple, one-word phrases, because I recognize that culture will mean different things to different people. But in thinking about it, we as individuals have a culture that we operate under a code of conduct that we know, and we know what's right and wrong. Businesses need to do the same thing. So this is how these came about. And I've always been a great admirer of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Successful People. And this is how he approached the world. So community, in this instance, community does mean what community means to many of us. It's a community of people coming together. So a business has to be works, or I think has to operate in that fashion. As I said, culture can't be mandated. I can't say to you, Steve, you've got to work with that person or else. You may have to do that, but if you feel you want to do that, if you feel you work cooperatively, so the example I gave about you talking to somebody taking ownership. Now, if that person has to call the shipping department, if they have to call a technician in the field, you know, your lift experience, they have to go, Bob, we've got a really big problem here. Can I count on you to take care of that? Yes, Jerry, I understand what you're saying, and yes, we'll do that. I see what's happened here. You can count on me to take care of it. As opposed to, it's not my job. I didn't get the right paperwork. I won't bore you with this story, but I had a BT story just like that.
Oh, bore us away, please.
Well, I was installing. I moved a couple of years ago. Moved to a new location. Had BT do the installation. Had a guy call me. I absolutely had the installation done for the afternoon. This guy called me. He said, "Oh, I'm at the premises now. It's 10:30 in the morning." I said, "Well, I'm not there." He said, "Well, I've got the order here." He said, "It's the morning." I said, "No, I've got several texts and emails from BT confirming the time, and this afternoon." He said, "Well, all right, fine, I'm gone," and that was it. So I called into the contact center. Fortunately, found someone that was very supportive and helped me out. She said, "Yep, Mr. Brown, you're absolutely right. It's scheduled for this afternoon." And probably what had happened is someone this whole open reach BT thing that people have been talking about. So he probably had the wrong paperwork. And rather than taking ownership, rather than saying, "Mr. Brown, that's what I've got, but let me make the call. Let me call my dispatcher," whatever it happens to be, and verify what it is. He just couldn't be bothered. He just went, "Yeah, not my job." So community means we get together because that costs them time and money. And by the time my complaint went through them, I had 6 months credit from BT because of that. So it's cost them that. It's cost them more reputational damage the more times I tell this story. And so community means we do truly stick together. We work together to find a solution. And it can be expanded out. We see it in organizations like giffgaff, which is a mobile phone company which effectively is run by its customers. And they have a tremendous community in the literal sense of the word that helps people with problems. So if I have a problem, how do I get this sorted? Someone in the community generally comes along. So these are what I call four simple principles that I say are non-negotiable, because when you look and measure your company in the simplest ways, do we have a great culture? Do we communicate externally and internally? Do we have commitment throughout the organization? And do we have a community of people that we're proud to be part of and always stand up and help us? If you can look at those things and say, yeah, or we're on our way to fixing them, because they won't all be broken, but in one way or the other, there'll probably be room for improvement.
I mean, it's a very interesting area to be actually looking at, and it's a very interesting area to be contemplating. Do you think there is a moment, though, within an organisation where, I mean, we talk about BT, is it just their sheer size that means that that's what's going to happen? The fact that you've got an engineer who feels, he too is a bit part player in all of this, isn't it? He's got his perceived responsibilities, what he needs to do, what he needs to get through, his own KPIs. The call handler has similar circumstances. But because the company is so large, the engineer will never know who the call handler was. Right. And the senior management will never know the call handler or the engineer. They will never see them. They are but numbers on a spreadsheet, aren't they? Is it the size of the businesses that is causing the issue?
It's certainly having an effect on it. There's no question about that. But I think the thing is that if you're right about KPIs, because that installer probably had a certain amount of time to complete the job. As far as he was concerned, he was at the job at the right time. For him to wait around, so even if I'd said, oh, well, I'll be there in half an hour, for him to wait around, that probably then put his schedule off. It probably would inconvenience another customer. So I understand the human reaction to, you should be here. But what I don't understand is the lack of the rationale to figure out why it happened. And so if a business starts looking at these things, and we know that people like BT, these big companies, they do track this, I'd really want to know how many appointments are we missing? Because interestingly enough, Jill Inslee in the Sunday Times wrote about her experience with BT. And what they tend to do is if you miss an appointment, they charge you £150. And you know, they're very good at doing that. So in other words, if you didn't show up, if you weren't there when the installer got there, and I understand that. I mean, I get the fact that if you've said this and you're not there, you might not like it, but yeah, you know, I get it.
I can tell you it's not £150 anymore. It's
Well,
gone up.
it keeps
I
going
mean,
up.
last week we had a telephone out. As I said at the beginning of the program, my father's in hospital at the moment, and but his line was down. And when I phoned up, there is a threat that they...
Oh, yeah.
We sound like we're doing BT knocking, and that isn't the issue. But I think that large organisations are doing this on a regular basis because they're thinking about them first and not the customer first.
Of course.
No customers, you don't have a business.
Exactly.
So the first thing they say to me is... if we turn up and it is the apparatus within your home, it's £179,
Yep.
and then it's like a game show. So, do you want to take the £179 gamble? Because if it's your fault, that's how much you pay.
Yeah.
And then honestly, you could nearly have a piece of music in the background and a ticking clock, and somebody standing there with a gun over your head. And so you've got to, you know, they are losing the art of customer care, aren't they?
And I think the thing is that we understand the world has changed. It used to be, it was same in Canada. Everything was provided by the phone company. It's not that way anymore. And I think that that's understandable, and I understand them necessitating saying that. But it's one of the issues that comes up. But I think the thing is, again, it's how you handle these things. This is what is upsetting people. And the reason, you know, we talk about the BTs and these other companies, utility companies, because
can we say another company but BT?
Well, we all deal
let's
with them all the time.
Let's say Centrica
we
again.
deal with them all
Centrica.
the time, you see. That's the problem, Steve. If this was an occasional event, we might be able to forget it. But every time I talk to anyone about this subject, they will always bring one of these big companies into play. Oh, let me tell you about the experience I had.
Everybody has a story.
And because we're all doing. So this is the point. This is why I think that what's going on in the world in terms of the populist movement is going to eventually make these companies change. Kicking and screaming, maybe it'll take some time. Maybe a few will go under. We've heard, you know, people aren't too big to fail, so we probably need a few failures.
I do feel that it's like for the last hour you've been watching two grumpy old men moaning. But the thing about it is that as a business owner, we, for a small business, an SME in the UK, an SME in the world, no matter where you're watching the programme, as owners of our businesses, we truly can do something about it, probably more easily than the BTs, the Centricas, the utility organisations, the broadcast and media organisations. Because we are in complete control of what we perceive and what we see, we can do something about it, and we can make the experience better. And if we make the experience better for our customers, what's going to be the reward for that? Well, hopefully more customers, because what's the old adage about bad service you'll tell 11 people, good service you'll tell 2?
Well, of course, I think that number's gone up exponentially because of the, you know, ask about social media. Now, of course, it used to probably be bad service, you know, good service you tell 2, bad service you call 10. Now it's probably 10 million. And, you know, the United Brakes Guitars is a great example of that. So
and if you haven't seen that video, I do suggest you go on the YouTube, type in United Brakes Guitars, listen to the song, and not only is it very funny, but you would think an organisation that had that done to them would have done something about it, but yet United continue not to.
They now break hearts.
Okay, listen, as always, it's a fascinating show. Is there any key thing that we've missed out, do you feel?
Well, I think there's nothing real. I think we've covered the ground.
We've beaten up the regular contestants.
We are, but again, it's because it keeps happening. I guess this is the point. You asked me off the top, is it getting any better? It's not getting any better. You know, we keep saying the same thing. So I think we've hit the things. Again, I come back to, you know, what you just pointed out. Businesses can change. It's like human beings. We can change. You know, we know if we're eating too much. We know if we're not exercising enough. We know these things. Companies know these things too, and they should know the results. We know the results if we don't take care of ourselves. Companies should realize that the results if they don't take care of themselves and, of course, their customers.
Brilliant, absolutely fabulous. Jerry, we always ask our guests to look straight down the camera lens and to present down the lens to us. Please, in your own time, who you are, where you're from, and away you go.
So I'm Jerry Brown, the Customer Life Guide. I am on a mission to save the world from bad customer service, and I'm trying to do it one customer at a time. But I think the point I would like to leave you with is really just to say what I just said to Steve. As an organization, as a company of any size, you do control your own destiny. You do control the ability to deliver a great customer experience. And you will probably find that if you bring this to your employees, they will absolutely engage with you. We've heard about employee experience, how important it is. If you make the point to them that this is great for everybody, that this is something that they can participate in, they're not being told they must do this and they must do that, they play an active part, it will make a huge difference. Because as we said off the top, when a customer wins, nobody loses.
All summed up in one simple word there. Let's look very quickly at Jerry's website. It's called thecustomerlifeguard.com. If you go onto his website, you'll get all this fantastic information, experiences, everything. If a customer has a bad online experience, then calls you, do you know, and can you adapt your response appropriately? Some good advice on there as well. There's a good blog on it too. Also, the services that Jerry provides to large and small multinationals. If you want to find out more information, please be our guest and go to customerlifeguard.com. It's been a really interesting show today. Can I thank you for all of it? You had a pile of paperwork over there. Yes. And I think it just does highlight that no matter how big you are, it's very easy to get it wrong. Absolutely. And the consequences can be catastrophic for your organisation and for your business.
Very painful.
And we see that. And the question, I suppose, is within an organisation, we talked about culture earlier on, where does it all start from? Can a culture be driven? Can it be directed by those at the top? And if you've got a culture at the top that is a caring culture, an informative culture, a talking culture, a communicative culture, does that filter its way down? And as it works its way through the different layers of your management team, do you suffer within your organisation from Chinese whispers as well? Is the intentions right at the top, but by the time it gets sanitised and it's at the coalface, have you still got the same message? And how do you make that happen? How do you find out? Where's your checks and balances to make certain that the top is talking to the coalface and the coalface is talking to the top? It is a difficult subject. You're going to be back again, aren't you, talking about
Well,
that?
I think, as I said, it keeps going on and there's different ways of approaching it, but I try to take this simple approach and it seems to be working. People recognize that if you look at these four simple ways of looking at your own business, as I said, the way you might look at your own life, it has an amazingly cumulative effect and really does, I talk about rallying the troops, getting the people together. This is a good way of doing that. It's a great topic. It's a great area for people because the people will want to do it. I've never found an employee at whatever level that isn't interested in doing this. They just want the chance to do it.
You alluded earlier on to the book very quickly. Yep. The plug is the book.
Yes.
You've written the book. In fact, you did a little bit of recording here before we started today in our sound booth, which was fabulous. What a lovely way to listen to it being read because of that lovely Canadian accent of yours. When's the book available? When's it going to be launched?
Hopefully, it should be available on Amazon probably by mid-March. I had some communication with my publisher today. She's making really good progress of it. So I think probably by about mid-March, I'll certainly be not shy about promoting it. So the title of the book is When a Customer Wins, Nobody Loses. So we're hoping that we'll get that out and we'll maybe have an audible version as well, so I can take advantage of being able to speak it as well as have people read it.
Listen, Jerry, thank you very much indeed for joining us today on this edition of Business Connections Live. Hope you found it an interesting day. Once again, don't forget, if you want to go to Jerry's website, it's customerlifeguard.com. That wraps up today's program. Just a quick reminder about who's coming up on future programs. Well, on next week's program, we've got David Richards from DriveTech. He's going to be coming in. If you're a fleet manager out there at the moment and you want to find out how maybe DriveTech and what you should be considering when it comes to sorting out and running your fleet, making certain that your drivers are legal, making certain that the vehicles that they drive, making certain that really you're up to date with it, and also the things that influence your drivers as well. How do you have safer drivers on your fleet? David Richards, he'll be explaining all that on next week's edition of the program. Coming up on future programs, we've got Emma Taring of the Marketing Matrix. She's going to be joining us here on the show, and Peter Liner, the chairman of ABLE from the Academy of Business Leaders. Do you know that practically wraps up today's program? It's It's absolutely been fantastic to have your company. Once again, my thanks to you, Jerry Brown, the customer lifeguard, for joining me. But from me, Steve Hullen, and the rest of the team here at Business Connections Live, have a great week. We'll see you next Monday, live at 12 noon. Bye for now.